Hey, I'm Jim Sear.
And I'm Jocelyn Youat.
And you're listening to the Avoiding Chores podcast.
Where we are now in 1981.
1981, folks. If you've been catching this late, we're doing a whole series on the best year of the 80s. But then we decided to just do every year of the 80s to think back, recollect. Because, we're both product of the 80s. Jocelyn, 1981, what's the first thing you remember?
Well, the first thing I remember is that we... you remember back then in the movies, you had ratings that were, 14 and up, for movies.
Yeah.
And so 1981 is the first year that I was legit to go see 14 and up movies. The year before, I had changed the date on my student card so I could get in 14 and up movies. So that's what I remember about 1981.
Oh, but you know what? There was quite a few good movies that came out in 1981. We kind of forget some of the big ones that came out that year.
Yeah, I mean, I think arguably the biggest one that came out was Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes, absolutely. Raiders of the Lost Ark still is huge today. Although I haven't watched it in the last couple of years, I think, though, it's time to get back to it.
Yeah, you know what? It's again with this with the 80's comeback. Yeah, I think it's time to go back and watch that one. It was a pretty amazing one.
And you know what? This is also the time where the whole drive-in thing was starting to start on its downside. You had different movies that you don't see anymore. The Cannonball Run.
Oh, yeah. That whole genre of movie has disappeared, really.
And the funny thing is, I was on YouTube last night. I was watching clips of Cannonball Run from the first movie.
No kidding.
I was watching.
Really?
I honestly, guy, I'll show you my YouTube history. And
that is funny.
I was watching it. It was crazy. It was crazy. But, man, I got to tell you, the best story I got for movies in 1981. 1981 was also the year of Porky's.
Oh, God, really?
Canadian movie. I believe... Well, people our age would know what it is, but man, I got this fantastic story. So this is back when you were renting VCR tapes, right? So you go down to the store, or some other house downstairs, and you would rent a VCR tape. You go up and do it, and in the spring, let's say May, something like that. Well, our house was was prone to flooding in the spring because of the St. John River and all that stuff in New Brunswick. So here I am. So every spring for a few years before we kind of improve our drainage here, the basement would flood, and I would have to take a broom and get the shop vac, and we got pumps going to pump out the water and stuff. But we had just installed the rec room downstairs a year before. So we had the couch and the TV, and that's where we did our viewing and VCR watching. But before things started to get bad, and this is when you rented a VCR tape, you had it for like a week or 2 weeks or whatever. Well,
and you better rewind it.
Now, here's the thing. So, unbeknownst to me, the folks, or my dad, got Porky's for like 2 weeks, but then it started flooding in the basement. So here I am. I'm brushing the water into the hole to pump, and then I see my dad and my uncle in rubber boots sitting on the couch in a flooded basement watching Porky's on the VCR.
That's a classic story. That's incredible. Wow, that's funny. One of the movies I remember, and again, something that is still very much current. James Bond was big. Of course, it was already big before that in the 70s. But for me, the first James Bond movie I remember is For Your Eyes Only. And to this day, for me, James Bond is still Roger Moore.
Absolutely.
The totally over-the-top, suave, debonair Roger Moore. Although Daniel Craig is a close second.
He's pretty good. You know what? Yeah. Sheena Easton did the theme song for that.
Exactly. Wow, Sheena Easton. Isn't that crazy?
Hey, but it's funny. We'll mention it later on, but my first James Bond was Moonraker. That's the first one I remembered.
Yeah, okay, a few years after. Because you're a few years younger than I am, right. So that's fine. Wow.
Oh, man, that was a good one. Man, yeah, James Bond, that was one that was event watching, too.
Yeah, and it's I would say that a new James Bond movie launching today is still a bit of an event, but back then it really was way bigger.
Oh, and you know what? Something that was really big back then too is release of new software like MS-DOS by Microsoft, 1981.
Really?
Yeah.
MS-DOS. I remember using that.
Wow. Remember, using floppy disks to load like 2 or 3 of these disks to load up the operating system on your computer. Oof.
Hey, funny story about the floppy disk. I saw that the other day. Actually, a floppy disk was shown to kids, and one of the kids said, "Oh, geez, they manufactured the save icon." Because for them, a floppy disk,
that's right.
It looks like the save
It is
icon on
it's
every
still
piece.
Used.
It's still used, exactly, and people know what it is. Isn't that funny?
But you know,
Oh,
but something that has changed a lot also is MTV. MTV, the music station, the whole concept of music video stations.
Yeah, I before that there was, I remember a show that was called Friday Night Videos, and which you kind of named your Friday Night Hangout of a couple of years ago after.
That's right.
But that was where you watched videos before MTV was launched, and for me, I'm gonna for sure talk about MTV again in 1984 because that's when it became big with the big charity concerts. But yes, MTV, which is now only a pale shadow of its former self.
You know what, folks? If for those who are listening who are too young to remember MTV in its heyday, early 80s, man, that was, I'd say 88 up to 88. We'll mention it later on. Oh man, that was good times.
Yeah, it was a big deal, and that's how, that was pre-YouTube, of course, and now you can watch whatever video whenever you wanted. Yeah. But back then, you would just stay glued to the TV and MTV and then Much Music in Canada, hoping that your favorite video would come on.
Good times, good times.
Hey, Lady Di married Prince Charles in 1980. 81, sorry.
Yes.
81.
I remember getting up at 4 a.m. as a kid to watch that wedding, and I don't remember a dang thing about it.
I think a lot of people remember the long dress that she wore, and with the train having to be carried by little girls following her. Yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to try to find some of the clips here, the best of here. But
I'm sure that's not very hard to do.
I think, though, however, if we forward ahead for subsequent weddings, I think the only thing that people remember recent times is Pippa's dress for Prince William and what's her name, Kate's sister, Pippa's sister. There, I forget her name. So yeah. So yeah, I mean, 81. Oh man, that was a crazy year. Well,
you remember Olivia Newton-John with Physical? That's the year it came out.
Well, the video.
The video, of course. We all remember the video. Dolly Parton's 9 to 5. I mean, kind of weird pop culture things that are still... people still remember them for some reason.
It's funny. I watched 9 to 5 recently, too.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Because it was either on the Netflix or on the iTunes for a free movie, and I wanted to watch it. You know what? This is the theme of the podcast: nostalgia, 80 nostalgia. Hey,
okay, but you don't have to be nostalgic about everything.
No, but that was 9 to 5 wasn't a bad movie. It was kind of interesting. I was too young to understand what was in it. Now that I watch it afterwards, it's like, oh man, this is hot.
Hey, I'll take your word for it. I'm not going to go watch it again.
Oh, okay. Hey, you know what? The other thing that came out, that happened in 81 was the Iran-American hostage situation that came to a close in 81.
Yeah, that was a big deal. I mean, I remember the year before, I guess Ken Taylor, the Canadian ambassador, smuggled some of the people that were stranded in the U.S. embassy, and smuggled them and brought them back to North America, and that was a big deal. But yeah, that's 444 days the hostages were kept in Iran. That was a pretty big deal.
That was a big deal, and I think if we were to dig through some history podcasts or articles, you would see how the Ronald Reagan committee or stuff that were doing their own side negotiations to try to usurp Jimmy Carter, try to make him look weak, and all that kind of stuff there. So that was really interesting. So
that's right. I forgot about the whole political aspect of it. Hey, the one thing that was probably the most striking for me in 1981, because I was back then I wanted to become an astronomer, of all things, but the Space Shuttle Columbia, the first flight of a space shuttle, happened in that year, and I still remember that my parents, I thank them for this, because they allowed me to stay home from school, and I know not that many parents would have done that. And I stayed home from school and watched the launch live on TV. And, like a bunch of years later, 36 years later, I remember that day. There's no way I would have remembered whatever they taught at school that day. Really is not important in the great scheme of things. But this grand event is something that I remember to this day.
Wow. Yeah, it's true. Well, like we mentioned a couple of episodes ago when we first started off this 80's tour back into time here, the space shuttles, that was when, for us, for our age group, that was required watching. That was must-watch TV.
It was event TV, and you couldn't go back and watch it again on YouTube. You had to watch it live, or else all you saw were short clips, on the news at 6.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Jocelyn, I think we'll just cut it for this episode here. I hope people enjoyed this walk down memory lane, 1981. We're going to do the whole series. Next episode is 1982. Folks, if you like this episode, give us a 5-star or a honest rating on either Apple Podcast or Stitcher or Google Play. Make sure you follow us on social media, either on Facebook. That's a good place. Just search for Avoiding Chores. Or you can go to the website, avoidingchores.com, and look up past episodes that way. Folks, if you need to know where to look, just search for Avoiding Chores.